The missed leap. People imagine that faith requires dramatic leaps. They picture heroic moments where someone steps off a cliff of certainty into the unknown. But after living through a few life cycles, I've realized something very simple. The real leap of faith is to live without the cynic. The cynic offers a veneer of protection, shielding us from embarrassment, from ridicule, and from the risk of being wrong in public. It allows us to keep circling an idea indefinitely without ever committing ourselves to it. While we rotate, we can still imagine ourselves brave and sound very astute on social media. People can spend their lives waiting for the moment when a great opportunity demands courage. They are ready to leap when the moment arrives. What they don't realize is that the opportunity was at the beginning, 0 degrees the entire time. The courage required to simply trust the point. Everything you need is in your possession now. Building a framework for the skeptic. Skepticism asks questions. Cynicism distrusts the answers. My solution was not to silence the skeptic, but muzzle the cynic. So I built a framework strong enough to outthink my inner cynic. That framework became mathematical phenomenology and hermeneutics. It allowed me to investigate lived spiritual experience using the analytical discipline that mathematics demands. It gave language to insights that might otherwise sound like poetry or zeal. It created a place where faith and scrutiny could share the same room. In truth, I built the field largely to satisfy my own inner critic. If the ideas survived that level of examination, they would survive anything. And they did. Truth in performance. The final argument was not theoretical, but practical. The organizing principle I developed continued to work in real life. It holds under pressure and produces clarity where confusion once lived. That is the moment when something deeper than debate begins to occur. Truth in performance. The TIP. The tip. Some people never get the point until they feel the tip. Ideas can sound beautiful in theory. They can sound convincing in conversation. But when an idea can produce coherence in lived experience, that idea becomes a realization. When a realization survives long enough to be felt or embodied, it stops being just an idea and takes form in action. It becomes real, at least to the person realizing. Realizations are like blueprints. Some should be constructed and others filed away. The organizing principle of the individual mind discerns what should be brought out of the mind and into the world. Faulty or absent organizing principles can cause destructive constructs. This is what truth in performance does. It studies the action, behavior, and results of realization blueprints as lived constructions. Not just the ideas. Living dissolves weak ideas. Once the line between constructing and ideation is clear, getting to the point is easy. The system phase shifts. The return to zero. Even after that shift, one question remained. Would this construct work? Time has a way of softening edges and dulling points. But how many more times would I walk the mind garden circumference before harvesting? Did I love this new growth so much that I was afraid to let it go? Life answered the question. When my mother died, the reaper cleared the field with non-negotiable accuracy. As before, loss has a way of returning you to zero. Standing again at that coordinate, both the end and the beginning, I realized this time was different. I wasn't in the midst of scorched earth, but at the end of a season. Do I take what I know about mind cultivation and use what's on the ground? Or do I cycle back through gardening school because the cynic says it's never going to be enough? The work was done. The insights tested. The structure had proven itself through lived experience. Would I allow the cynic to claim victory after all of that? I could not. Sin and sin. There is one interesting observation that kept returning as this work was developed. The word cynicism contains a curious echo of the word sin. Etymologically, they are unrelated. Language scholars will tell you the roots come from entirely different places, and yet the resemblance is difficult to ignore. Cynicism behaves like psychological sin against hope. It's the hope marauder. Look at the world. Every turn tells you to be afraid. Every news cycle offers a fresh reason to distrust humanity. Everyone is either a scammer or a pervert. Those people can't be trusted, and these people can't be liked. Suspicion becomes the default posture of intelligence. Under those conditions, becoming cynical is effortless, even recommended. In some circles, the cynic is the cool one. Flippant, dismissive, too smart to be fooled, too busy to like living, and too angry to love. And people like it. Keep it real. Keep it angry. Grr. With this kind of group validation, escaping cynicism can be difficult. If the pack says hate it, most will keep circling the same marauding conclusions forever. The dynamic between skepticism, cynicism, and recognition resembles the moment depicted in M.C. Escher's Encounter, Figure 1, where two figures emerge from the same geometric order and meet briefly before dissolving back into the pattern that produced them. The end of the circle. This is where my journey eventually leads. To Jesus Christ. The Alpha and Omega. This phrase is usually heard as a poetic way of saying beginning and end. But once placed on the unit circle, the concept becomes not just visual, but practical. Your personal faith may use different words, but there's a component of every truth-seeking path that reminds us that the beginning and the end are the same. Alpha is the start of the circle. Omega is the completion of the circle. And mathematically, they occupy the same coordinate. The beginning and the completion collapse into a single point in space. This is not just theological poetry but cyclical topology. The concept that Jesus died for the sins of the world can be difficult for some to accept. Faith has never been a simple intellectual equation. However, there is something psychologically undeniable about the effect belief in Christ has on the human mind. A person cannot hold true faith and cynicism in the same space. Faith introduces trust, where suspicion once ruled. Hope interrupts the endless rotation of doubt. Devotion to the Son of God forces the mind to consider that goodness is real. Cynicism and hope are not compatible. The point cannot hold both hope and doubt, which means that faith, even when it begins as small as a mustard seed, performs something remarkable. The cynic is silenced. Who silences your cynic? 0 to 360. The unit circle has been quietly teaching this lesson the entire time. You can recognize the truth when you first encounter it at 0 degrees, or travel around the entire circumference testing every possibility until you arrive back at the end 360 degrees. Either way, you end up standing on the same point. This is not failure, but cycle completion. The key is discernment. Is this completion simply a harvesting reaper signaling the end of season, or the reaper? For the cynic, it's always the reaper. The cynic is not wise, but afraid. Sowing 359 degrees of cynicism, the mind can't help but fear the reaper at 360. Sometimes the bravest thing to do is silence the voice that demands endless rotation and trust the truth given to you, whatever that may be. Often the most courageous leap of faith is not from a cliff, but simply refusing to traverse the same cycle again. If completion and beginning share a point in space, the only real question is how many times will you traverse the same cycle before you start moving upward? Conclusion of Part 1. As I mentioned in the beginning of this essay, my every examination returned the same insight. And each time my inner cynic whispered the same objections. Now I've answered them. This will make you look naive. Be as little children. People will think you are irrational. Perhaps. I can go on and on without ever repeating. Someone will call this cultish. See cultura animi. Other cynics will accuse you of just trying to get money. It's harvest time. I'll reap what I've sown. Black women don't do this. Will I have trouble without white male authority? I am a black woman and it is done. By what authority? If you have to ask, you've missed my point. Part 2. Why Christ? Not that an explanation is due, but I'm thorough. This was a real-life endeavor, not an abstract exercise. These questions had to be resolved within my mind before I ever wrote about them. When I said that I was too knowledgeable to know anything, that's not philosophical flair. It's a practical condition. I've studied widely and have no shortage of frameworks available to organize my thinking. Philosophy, theology, mathematics, psychology, and cultural analysis all offer possible structures. Each provides a different way to interpret experience. In principle, I could have oriented my mind around any number of systems, runes, yarrow sticks, or even a bowl of spaghetti. There was also the option of refusing orientation altogether and letting life carry me wherever the current moved. In practice, that rarely leads to stability. Floating can look exciting, but detachment can be adventurous. Creating your own experiences is how life is lived. However, perpetually drifting tends to end in disorientation, confusion, and financial insecurity. Time makes orientation necessary. Time is a factor that we can't control. It is also important to consider that I did not simply wake up one morning and decide to reorganize my thinking. My previous life had become as the scorched earth. What once existed was gone. I was not struggling to find space for new crops in an old garden. I was witness to the emergence of an entirely different landscape grown from seed, a cosmology of mind being developed cosmologically. That situation changes the nature of the question and experience entirely. Without the pressure to preserve old structures or justify past assumptions, I could observe the terrain with unusual clarity. In that setting, I evaluated the various organizing principles available to me. Human beings will inevitably arrange their thinking around something. Some anchor themselves to career, reputation, relationships, or cultural ideology. Others orient around intellect, skepticism, or social identity. All of these can function as temporary coordinates, but they share a common weakness. They are tied to conditions that change with time. Earth things change as the Earth rotates, while we race to invent ways to battle these changes. So what? Earth things will always change as the Earth rotates. Trying to stop change is like trying to separate work from displacement. The human mind operates the same way as the Earth moves. It works, it displaces, it rotates. It orbits. At times it behaves like the sea, restless and shifting. At other times it drifts like the wind, or hardens like rock rolling downhill. Some minds have low melting points like lead, and can sag under their own weight over time. Others have a higher melting point like gold, and can maintain their structure better under stress. Thoughts rise and settle. Doubts ripple through understanding, and ideas return again and again in cycles of reflection. These cognitive undulations require an anchor capable of holding through movement and time. If the anchor point shifts with every new circumstance, the mind spends its energy constantly recalibrating, rather than understanding. When I evaluated the options available to me, I sought the point that required the fewest additional assumptions to maintain coherence over time. How many coincidences are necessary to notice the pattern? In philosophical terms, this resembles the principle often associated with William of Ockham. When several explanations are possible, the one that introduces the least unnecessary complication is often the most durable. Many potential anchors demanded constant adjustment as culture changed or circumstances evolved. They required ongoing maintenance to remain convincing. The mind of Jesus Christ, 1 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 16, however, already contains a structure capable of organizing suffering, sacrifice, humility, endurance, teaching, gardening, death, and renewal within a single narrative frame. That structure has persisted across centuries of social and historical change. Furthermore, the water metaphors are useful parabolic mirrors into the human analog brainwave. From the standpoint of intellectual economy, Jesus Christ functions as a stable coordinate, an anchor, a point, more consistent than most of the points presented to us. So this was not a matter of defaulting to tradition or adopting a position out of habit. It was the result of examining the available structures and choosing the one that held together most coherently across the full range of human experience I had encountered. This isn't presented as doctrine or a life prescription. I doubt any sane person would want to repeat my process. This is simply an account of what occurred and how the structure unfolded as I worked through it. It is one example of free will, the result of a priori knowledge merging with a posteriori wisdom. The ancient choice persists. Jesus or Barabbas? How this feels, most of this work, reads like a study on the effects of overthinking. But what most people call overthinking is just Tuesday morning coffee hour to me. The path of my inner cynic wasn't one of endless rumination, but a habit formed early in my education, the classical balance of ethos, pathos, and logos, credibility, emotional understanding, and clear reasoning. In many intellectual spaces, especially mathematics, ethos arrives automatically with familiar images of authority. Often European men in lab coats alone are treated as proof enough. I've learned that I cannot rely on that shortcut, nor can I assume that we'll share the same emotional ground either. Human ontologies are as unique as our fingerprints. Therefore, my reasoning has to stand its own ground. Logos must be clear and correct. Through me, logos flows mathematically. A person may not like my face, abhor my gender, or be repelled by my style of emoting. But the math? The math is what it is. Now we come to the completion of my circle. Logos, the word for reason, structure, and coherent argument, is also the word the Gospel of John uses for Christ. In the beginning was the word logos, and the word logos was with God, and the word logos was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. John chapter 1 verses 1 to 3. The idea that kept my thinking honest eventually led me back to the same point, the logos. But that's just a simple equation using homonyms as variables. The truth is, this is love. There is a particular kind of joy when thoughts that once felt scattered finally settle into a shape that can be shared with someone else who might be searching for the same thing. Radiating this love using all tools available is my joy on this journey. Over the years, I've written and produced 4 albums, created a faux musical, and published a book series, Illusions of the Grandeur. Will the real Jesus please stand? When people hear the name Jesus, they will default to their own images and impressions of Jesus. Seldom do we stop to ask what Jesus means to the speaker. Not just who Jesus is, but what the concept of this being means. What are you saying when you talk about Jesus? Unfortunately, to many people, the name of Jesus has been twisted into a signal to stop no-no square touching, drinking, having fun, to feel guilt, etc. The mind of Christ is greater than church Jesus, the slogans, the Sunday sound bites, the memes or churchy folk. The mind of Christ is more than a Jesus piece around the neck. It's aligning the mind with the peace of Jesus. Peace as in shalom, something richer than calm, implying wholeness, alignment, and things fitting together in their proper place. This alignment doesn't come casually and is an action. Note that the first book after the Gospels is the book of Acts. So when I say that Jesus Christ is my point, it isn't a stationary declaration, but a point of action. It's the result of a long search for the one thing that remained when everything else moved. The Logos. Further exploration. This essay is the visible edge of the much larger body of work called Mathematical Phenomenology and Hermeneutics. The ideas presented here emerged through 7 or 52 years of study, observation, reflection, and lived experience that now sit documented across my website for anyone inclined to examine them. This work was created because the first cynic to be silenced was in my own head. Every connection between mathematics, consciousness, scripture, and lived experience had to survive the most difficult test available to it: my own doubt. I didn't want to slip into numerology, vortex math, or Tesla 369 worship. I questioned repeatedly. I rotated the problem and tested the ideas from multiple angles, challenged them with study, and tried to break the framework wherever possible. I assure you, I am a formidable opponent. I'm from Cleveland, and here cynics flourish like dandelions. If an idea could survive me, then it was strong enough to be written. If it could not, it disappeared long before reaching the page. I will not be accused of escapism or idolatry, so when I say that the Logos holds, that is not the result of spiritual bypass. It is the outcome of years of intellectual sparring with one of the most relentless critics available: myself. The record of this multi-year inquiry is available for others to chew on. I'm eager to hear how it tastes. Tell me, does it need more salt? Or perhaps my lead has turned to gold? Winking face. The discussion about what happened is done. This is a report of the terrain as I experienced it, and it is a gyre. And when the waters of thought rise and fall within this gyre, the anchor point must hold. Jesus Christ is my point. What's yours? En arche en hologos, kai hologos en proston theon kai theos en hologos.